Okay, well, it's Friday. Let me adjust my camera a little bit. Also means you can hear the trash truck because every time I start this, the trash truck drives by. Yeah, that's pretty good. Camera. Today I flipped the room. So I'm trying to have my face in shadow and then everything blown up behind me and see if that looks better. I feel like it does. I'm also zoomed in really far and that was just an accident, but yeah. Also, that's better. That's my camera tweak. It's also, I put it in 60p today, just to 60 frames, just to see how it looks. Did I write this week? No. And you can hear the trash truck. I didn't write because I've been dumping everything onto my Google Drive because one of the universities I attended has a bottomless Google Drive account, and I don't think Google Drive is great, but it stores stuff. You just have to be really meticulous about it. And I made the mistake of putting a very big folder into Google Drive at my relatively slow internet location and pretty much had to abandon my laptop for a week as it did it, as I put a bunch of other stuff on hard drives and took them to a library that had faster internet to do it that way. So I pretty much didn't have my computer for a week, which was not as tough as I thought, but I also didn't write any. So no, I didn't write. And I'm finally done upload. It was not even that much uploading into Google Drive. I think I uploaded 2 terabytes into Google Drive and it took me 9 days. So apparently Google Drive has a 750 gigabyte per day limit that they don't tell you about. I didn't hit it, but I came across that rumor a bunch of times. Just took a while. I tried a bunch of different strategies. I tried using only my computer, and I realized the bottleneck was my internet wasn't fast enough. And so that's when I put stuff on hard drives and took them to the campus where they had incredibly fast computers and internet. And I figured out the bottleneck then became Google itself ingesting stuff. So there was one night where apparently traffic was low enough that I could have my laptop and 2 other computers uploading at the same time, and it worked okay enough. But the other day I did it on like the super editing computers for film school, and I ended up just doing it on one computer because there wasn't enough Google Drive bandwidth at Google to take it all in, and so it was having to go one at a time anyway. So I ended up just using one of the computers out of the 3 that I was planning on using, which is to say I'm learning. And if you're a working pro with a lot of data, especially video, I don't know if Google Drive would be the right choice, especially for the price, because I feel like it's like $100 a year or something. And the bottleneck is ingesting all the data into Google Drive. It also is a pain in the ass to get it off of Google Drive, and you have to have a Gmail account or a Google account to send it to somebody. So if the person you're sending it to doesn't have a Gmail, they won't be able to open it, which is kind of annoying. Yeah, so it's better than nothing. Always back up your stuff. I have a big hard drive that I back up to. I got rid of my slightly smaller hard drive because it's 5 years old and I just don't trust anything that old. So I bought a bigger hard drive, so I dump everything onto that. That's my backup hard drive. And then for projects, I buy a specific hard drive for that project, and at least the raw files go on to that hard drive, which goes somewhere else, which right now is still in my apartment, which is bad. And then the third location is the internet. And since my school has unlimited Google Drive, I'm doing that. If I end up working in a professional capacity that requires tighter deadlines and more accuracy, I'll probably buy Dropbox or something, or one of those, I don't know what they're called, TTL sites. I don't know, one of those sites that it uploads quickly to, just because Google Drive is very slow. and really works better for documents than it does video, and it screws up. I mean, admittedly, it took me like 9 days to upload stuff, but I think I had like 30 or 40 files that it told me were corrupted. So that's 30 or 40 files that we know about, and so there's a bunch that we definitely don't. Fortunately, none of this stuff is paid stuff, so I'm not super upset about it. And as far as screenwriting goes, I don't know why I'm going to this tangent. As far as screenwriting goes, every new draft or every big adjustment, not only do I label it like 10.1, or 10.2, that kind of thing, so that I keep doing it. I learned that from editors. I also email at least the PDF to myself right away, just because documents are super small anyway. And so I'll have it, and I'll have a timestamp, because I came across a thing the other day where myself and one of my co-patriots have a very similar project, and I've chosen to abandon the project on behalf of. She shot her thesis film about it, and I just have a first draft of it, even though technically the world saw my first draft a month and a half before she started even writing her project. But just based on politics and it's not worth the trouble. I'm not going to go forward with it, but if I had to, I have it emailed to myself, so there's a very clear timestamp on when my project came alive in the context of hers. And so if it became a situation, which it never will, because it just, neither of us are that rich and famous, where my script got success and she decided to sue me for the idea, I could prove that I had my script before she had her idea relatively easily. And that's, I don't know. I guess I want to talk about that too a little bit. Because it's a really common thing that young writers bring up all the time, and everybody I've talked to that has been exposed to this, almost everybody is like, it doesn't happen, and that's just not how it works. But there is such a thing as, oh my God, what if somebody steals my idea? And it definitely happens, but if somebody sues you, if you have a project and it gets made, and then somebody comes out of the woodwork and sues you saying they had the same project, I just honestly believe that most of the time it's, parallel thinking, or whatever that word is, where you guys came up with similar ideas around the similar time, because that's how it happens. I would say a third of my scripts, or a third of my ideas a year, I'm exposed to something that's very similar, usually on TV, because there's a lot of episodes, and it's usually stuff I watch because I'm in that headspace. So it's coincidence, but it's a thing that happens. And if it comes down to a lawsuit, you would want to be able to prove, always register yourself with WGA, although I tend not to, just because it doesn't hold up anywhere. It's kind of a waste of time, but you want to be able to prove that you had the idea first. But the very idea that you would go into litigation or a lawsuit or something over an idea makes both parties pretty much untouchable, which is really bad news. So, usually the only time somebody sues somebody else for an idea, it's because somebody else had incredible success based off of it, and it's usually a Hollywood movie by that point, which I guess would give the person with no power an opportunity to get a little bit of power back. But other than that, if a writer sues a writer, don't expect. I'm not optimistic that either of those writers will ever work again. So, but parallel thinking happens, and I've been exposed to a lot of really, like, I'd say once a year, somebody that's not me brings up an idea for a project that I'm like, perfect pitch, and because it's not mine, and so years down the road, it happened to me the other day, I was like, what if I do this? That's a really great idea, but I feel like I've heard of that before, and sure enough, I looked it up, and a guy I know had pitched me this idea, and I'm like, well, even if I, like go through the process of making sure that it's nothing like what the guy pitched me, he and I had a conversation about it. And so in the unlikely event that my project takes off, it would be enough to give him impetus to sue me, which would make us both untouchable, which is sort of, it kills everything. So I have a really great Die Hard in a blah, blah, blah idea, but because it's so similar to something a guy pitched me 6 years ago, I'm never going to write it because it's not worth that guy sort of tracking me down and ruining both of our careers. So that kind of thing. I think it's way less of an issue in television because there's a cat playing with something right outside my door. I think it's way less of an issue with television because television has so many episodes that even episodes of a show, two 22 episode shows, there will be very similar episodes once in a while just because parallel thinking and because of the climate we live in and all this stuff. Let me close my door. This guy is out of control. So, yeah. So, I don't know. It's a really interesting thing, and I'll always revisit it just because when you find a like a legitimately great idea, it'd be stupid not to pursue it. But if it's somebody else's legitimately great idea, you got to pay them, and it's the right thing to do. And if you don't pay them, and you're not, bad example, Harvey Weinstein. If you're not a Harvey Weinstein type of that level of power, I'm not talking about the sexual stuff really, but if you're not that powerful, it's not like you can't get away with it. You can't just tell them to go away. But even if you are at the level of a Harvey Weinstein level of producer, you would be prudent to just pay for the idea anyway. So it's kind of a moot point. So similar ideas happen constantly, and they happen to me constantly. And the closer I am to the person who has a similar idea, the less likely I am to pursue that idea, even though I recognize the idea is worthwhile, because it's not worth the risk. My stomach's growling. So, yeah, which is too bad, because the idea that my classmate had, that I had, I think is a legitimately great idea. And so maybe down the road, when our careers diverge a little bit more, maybe one of us will go to the other one, probably meet that person, and say, listen, do you mind if I do this? I just want you to know. And we'll have sort of a negotiation, and hopefully no money will change hands, but I'll, be like, listen, I had this idea, you had this idea. Can we both acknowledge that it's just a weird coincidence, and I'm not trying to copy you, and it's not going to affect your career, and it's really not going to affect my career, but do you mind if I pursue this idea? That kind of thing. And we'll see. If somebody brought that to me, oh man, now that I'm working out loud though, if somebody came up to me like that, I would say absolutely not. So maybe that's my answer. Maybe don't even bother. So if you have a parallel idea and it's parallel enough that it's somebody close enough to you that if you pitched it to a mutual friend and they would go, oh, this person had that idea, I guess in real time I'm deciding you gotta abandon it. Anyway, so did I write this week? No. Did I read this week? I did not. What did I watch this week? Well, I watched a lot because I was babysitting computers all week. So I finished Lost in Space, and I'm committed to it, and I finished it, and there are aspects of it that I really like the relationship between the two sisters I really like, and the relationship between the Doctor's sister and pretty much everybody she encounters. So maybe she should be the heart of the show, because really great. What's her name, who plays the evil Doctor, is still distractingly bad, and her character is just incomplete. But the show went into an interesting way. It was super slow, and I don't know. The watching Lost in Space left me wanting more, but not in a positive way, in a like you didn't finish kind of way. So I'm gonna keep watching when the next season comes out, if they get next season. It seems like it was a really expensive show to make. So I don't know. I don't usually get emotionally invested in shows that are that mediocre, but something about this show really pulled at my heartstrings. I don't know what it was. It might just be I'm trying to fill a void about space shows, and there aren't very many that I'm watching right now. Same reason I watched Seth MacFarlane's The Orville, I guess. I also watched Ibiza, which Netflix was pushing really hard, at least on me. I really like that cat. It's Gillian Jacobs and Vanessa Bayer, and I don't know the other girl. Go to Spain, and I guess Ibiza's in Spain, or I don't know. It's basically like a girl's road trip to Europe movie. Weird movie. Can't say I liked it. I don't know. It's like a party movie. Like it was a pretty straightforward, just party movie. But the way Netflix was pushing it to me, it seemed like it was going to be this like nuanced independent film that was half the bling ring, half something else, and it was just a very straightforward party movie. So the acting is good though. I mean, I like those actors. So I finally started watching The Crown on Netflix because everybody I've talked to is like, it's the greatest show in the history of shows, except for maybe the HBO Lord of the Rings show. I forget what it's called, that I don't watch, clearly. I'm hooked. The Crown is incredibly slow and incredibly gray, but there's something high level about it, honestly. Because it's so not my taste, I guess that's a credit to the filmmakers, because I'm on board. I look forward to watching every episode. I'm on episode 4 or 5 now already, and I've started it like 2 days ago. It's very slow. I guess it's just an example of elite level filmmaking, and that level of storytelling outweighs the fact that everything else about it is uninteresting to me. So yeah, I'm watching The Crown. I saw Solo, A Star Wars Story, and it did really bad this weekend, and what is there to say? It was about as good as I expected it to be, which was as good as an average movie, but catastrophically worse than any of the recent Star Wars movies. And most of the choices about the Han Solo character in this story, as a nerd, I disagreed with. And I really thought the main guy, Alden Ehrenreich, who had a big sort of backstory of they brought in an acting coach for him and all this other stuff to get him good. Borderline quality. I don't know. I don't want to hate on the movie because clearly it just had the stink of a failure all over it pretty early on, and they just had to like put on a brave face, and I can respect that. But at the end of the day, it doesn't hold up against the other recent Star Wars movies, and by that definition is a failure. So too bad. In the context of these sort of like standalone movies, it was Solo and then Rogue One. I quite liked Rogue One despite everybody else not liking it, and this was far worse than Rogue One. So it's too bad, because I think Han Solo is arguably the most interesting character in that universe. maybe Boba Fett or Chewbacca. Well, there's a lot. I take that back. Just the way it was the way this story about Han Solo played out. Why? What was the point? Sorry. I mean, I'm only upset about the creative choices. I'm not upset about anything else. It looked really great. They did the Kessel Run, and they flew by the Maw, and that was great. As a nerd, I was like, finally, and it was as incredible as I thought it was going to be. But I don't know, as a movie, man, I watched a lot of stuff. I started watching this Australian sitcom called Rostered On, and it's basically the Australian version of people working at a Best Buy. It's very sitcom-y, but it's also like kind of good, kind of really well written, really funny. I don't know how old it is, because it looks like it could take place now or it could take place 20 years ago. It's hard to say, but yeah, it reminds me a lot of Superstore, except Superstore is really progressive and goes in really controversial and dynamic directions, and Rostered On is just purely a sitcom. So Rostered On. And the other night I finally watched this movie Beast that's been in the theaters a while, and I couldn't bring myself to watch it, and I watched it, and it's good. It's a dark British thriller about about a community living on a British island, an isolated British island, and there's definitely a serial killer kidnapping and killing women. But the main character of this story is this sort of damaged, doesn't have a good grip on reality woman, like 28-year-old woman, who starts dating what everybody believes to be the killer. And it's very interesting because throughout the story, first you think the guy he saved her from is the killer, then you think he's the killer, then you think she's the killer, because she has such a unhelpful grip on reality. It's really hard to differentiate what is her and what is the story. It was really, but it carried me all the way through, and it was shot incredibly well. The cinematography they did this thing I'd never seen before. I just want to talk about movies today. They did this thing, so traditionally when you shoot two people talking, like at a bar, you shoot over the shoulder, and so one person will be facing inward this way. I lost my exposure. And then the other person will be facing inward this way when you cut back and forth, so that you're following the conversation as a person who's following it. So you're looking back and forth. It's a very conventional way to shoot it, and you're not crossing the 180-degree rule, which confuses people and all this other stuff. But the way they shot a lot of the conversations in this, and I think it was in the motivation of intimacy, they would be... So one person would be talking over here, looking off into the small spot, and then the reaction shot, they would be looking over here into, we lost exposure, but they would be looking over here into this way. So it's like the opposite. And it really did, instead of just organically following a conversation the way everything has been shot since, I guess, movies got made initially. It created a weird thing where instead of just transparently following the conversation, you're very aware that they are very close together, having a very intimate conversation, and the rest of the world is against them. It was what an effect. And that was just one of the things they did in that movie. They did a bunch of weird stuff. They also, the lighting was really strange, in that it was natural, but it was also... most of the time you couldn't really see their eyes very well. It was creepy, man. That movie needs to be taught in film school, because that was made the choice to break all the conventional rules, but also did it in such a way that properly delivered the story that they were telling. Writing tip. I wrote one, so let's look at it. This is 24 minutes, is bad. Okay, so this is for a script. You have your script. You don't know what you should be doing. It's spell checked. You think it's good. Go through the script one more time and pick a side character that's in at least a few of the scenes, and read the script from their point of view to make sure everything tracks. Because if their story, if you read it and they have a story, and it's obviously not going to be the great all-encompassing story that is the whole script, but if you read it from their perspective and they have a story that has a beginning, middle, end, and it works in every scene, then you have a robust story with round characters in it. Because it'll work in little standalone bits too, which is what you want. You don't want everything hinging on the next thing. You want standalone escalation, That's how you want to hinge it. You don't want to go, here's most of it, here's a little bit more, here's some more. You need to be able to, a scene needs to work. 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 And once in a while I'll pick a character that's in a third of all the scenes, and I'll just track it, not tracking their story, but tracking the story. Because you should, way before this moment, your mains track each of the main story to make sure their story works, but then go back and pick a side character and just track the story to make sure that if we only had the 4 scenes where this character's in, some kind of story makes sense out of it, and it's not just completely insane. And then the comedy joke would be, if you end up on the third and final scene of that character's story and it just doesn't make sense, that's where that character would have to go, what the hell is going on? They need to acknowledge something doesn't, like, they're missing something, and that I think would be a solution to that. I don't know, I'm just all over the place today. Box office, let's see, haven't pulled it up yet, so it's good that nobody watches this, because I'm not 27 minutes, this is like real bad. So it was the long weekend, which was supposed to be really great for Star Wars, and it opened pretty soft. So I said Solo, a Star Wars story, Deadpool 2, Avengers, Infinity War, Book Club, and Show Dogs. And I got everything except for Show Dogs, looks like. I screwed up on Life of the Party. So Life of the Party was number 5. I said Show Dogs. I was wrong on 1. It looks like Star Wars did 100 million, which is still like Wrath of God money, let's be real. And it'll definitely at least break even. But, the level that they're playing at with these Star Wars franchise movies and these comic book franchise movies, it doesn't, like, the economy and the logic of how everything works doesn't work at that level. It's a completely different set of rules. So I don't know, and it's so high stakes. Like, so when I was in like the 8th grade, we had my only exposure to stocks and trading in the stock market and everything was this like 6-week class where we followed the stock market. And right away, we all figured out that there was that one stock, I forget what it's called, super famous, that normal stocks are like 10 cents or $1 or like $12. And this stock was like $3,200 per stock. And so we were all like, easy peasy, we'll just buy one $3,200 stock, and however it goes up or down, we're gonna make a shitload of money. Problem solved. But then we figured out that you have to buy 100 of the stock. And so that's why nobody touches that stock, is because it's so preventatively expensive that it's not worth playing the game. And it's at that level that there's no winners or losers at that level. It's just staying in the game. And I would argue that's what these giant $100 million, $200 million blockbusters are. It's not about winning or losing. It's about playing the game. And so it's really not for anybody's benefit to do it, other than the studios, who a little uptick is a lot of money. But for everybody else, it's totally irrelevant. Whereas a regular, like a $10 million movie like Deadpool, for instance, the first one, goes into theaters, does really well. That is, by definition, a winner. And that's what you want, because everybody involved now benefits from it in a way that I would argue is life-changing. And if Deadpool, the $10 million film, had failed, it's a loser, and nobody's life is any different. So, yeah. So these giant movies, who knows? Like, at that point, you're dealing with like predicting an economy, and it's like there's a reason why the same four people are in that position in our American government, and it's because they're the only ones that know how to do it like that. And, it's like, it's the amount of risk is so high. It's like, what's the point at that point? So, not a position, even in these giant tentpole movies, I would not want to have a creative part in it, because the level of risk is so high. It's like, what are we doing here? I would happily risk my own house and I live alone, my own house and household to get a movie made, because I could start over. But multiply that by 10 million, and that's the scale of what you're up against with one of these blockbusters. Like, in how many lifetimes could I possibly earn back 10 million times what I've spent 30 years to get to? Like, it's just, the numbers just make me sick. So they're thinking, okay, so this is like the messiest one in a long time, and I think it's because my brain's like, you need to write, you need to be writing right now. I'm ready. Like, come on, Matt, just sit down and write. I'm ready. And I think that's why I'm just all over the place. I'm like loose associating, and I have opinions again, and all this kind of shit that I didn't have when I was under the gun as of recently. So, okay, so the article that I'm reading says no new summer blockbusters this weekend. So the only big three releases are Action Point, which is the Johnny Knoxville thing, which is an interesting idea. I don't really want to get into that, but I don't know. Johnny Knoxville has carved out a really interesting niche post Jackass, because he definitely had lightning in a bottle when he made Jackass, and everybody agrees. But then he made these weird, like, half narrative, half stunts, or half, he had Bad Grandpa, or what was that what it's called? I don't know. Anyway, these weird, they're half stunt movies, so they're like hybrid movies. I don't know. I guess they do okay, but I don't understand them. Like, I really like that they're funny and that they're cheap, and like, for the most part, nobody's getting, it's at the cost of nobody. Like, I don't think they're bad ostensibly. Not that you could ever say a film was bad in a moral sense. I think that's completely insane. But they're just, it's not a movie the way I understand movies, and I don't think his Johnny Knoxville version of it is successful enough to justify that as a new genre or type of movie. Because it's not a documentary, and it's not a reality show, and it's not a narrative film in a way we understand it. It's very strange. It's interesting. It's fascinating to me. I just don't think Johnny Knoxville, I think Johnny Knoxville is the only one like doing it properly, and it's not being properly done. I think he's the one doing it on the highest level, but I don't think he's found the winning formula yet. But he might. So yeah. So that's my opinion about that. So we have Adrift, Action Point, and Upgrade are coming out, but they're not blockbusters. So I'm gonna say Star Wars again, Solo, Deadpool 2, which is still cranking along, Adrift, which is new, which is a love story at sea, a shipwreck, and then Avengers, and then I'm going to say Action Point, even though this says book club. So, let's see. Yeah, so Solo, Deadpool, Adrift, Avengers, Action Point. I just stumbled through this. It's going to be 40 minutes, man. Recommend. I have a movie I'd like to recommend. People of my generation, I would argue, have all seen this movie somehow, but everybody else has never heard of this movie, and it's The Butterfly Effect. And it's got Ashton Kutcher. I think he was in that 70s show when this happened, but it's Ashton Kutcher and Amy Smart, and it's based on a book, and the idea is he figures out that through his journals, because he has really bad memory problems and he's in college now, that when he rereads his childhood journals, he ends up traveling back to that moment in time and is able to change stuff. But after he changes it, he comes back and he realizes it has catastrophically changed his world. And so the entire story is him trying to save Amy Smart, because she has just a tragic life that he very much had a part of, and he's trying every permutation to get to a place where he can be with her and also her be alive. And it's really interesting, and it's non-linear, but it's linear. But the thing that's real crazy about it, because I watched it again the other day, is if it was made today, it would be a very straightforward movie. It would basically be Live, Die, Repeat, or whatever that movie was called. The comic was All You Need Is Kill. Anyway, this is the Tom Cruise movie where he just keeps doing the same day over and over again, Groundhog's Day. It's basically that, and that's how it would be shot today. But for whatever reason, it was shot by like David Fincher or somebody like David Fincher in the early 2000s. And it plays out as a really nuanced thriller. Like, it's very quiet, it's very scary. Like, if you didn't have any of the dialogue, you would think this is a very scary, like serial killer movie or something. But it's not. It's like a tragic romantic thriller, I guess. So it's very scary. It keeps you very like there with it, because it's shot really aggressively, and the sound design is really, really aggressive, even though it's basically just Ashton Kutcher just crying and reading his journals and then going back to his childhood over and over again. So it's like The Sixth Sense meets Groundhog's Day. It's really interesting. And I would argue it's the best acting Ashton Kutcher has ever done, bar none. I've talked for almost 40 minutes, and I'm so sorry. Consolation prize, nobody watches this. Have a good weekend.